Well, we're out here early morning with the pond because, and I was aware of this last year actually, somewhere along the perimeter I'd got a puncture, or a small hole anyway, and the water level was dropping 6 to 8 inches, a bit annoying. So I'm topping it up and it's just draining out almost as fast as I'm topping it up. So I thought, well, the only way to do it, and my dad originally lined this pond. I don't know how many years ago he did it, but I thought the best thing to do is reline it. But that was a good 40 quid for this area, and I still had a fair bit to cut off on the edge. You've got to have enough. It's no good just going for just enough and then finding you're too short. Otherwise you've wasted your money, haven't you? So anyway, what I discovered was, over in that area, as you'll see on these pictures, I had a root that was sticking out. It was actually a fern that was over the back, and so I had to get to that and sort that out, and then relined it. I dug it all out. I'll tell you, for this job you certainly need Wellingtons, and even then I had wet socks. So anyway, while I've done it, I've relocated the pump now, so it now sits on that end. It's almost on the bottom. Probably needs pulling down a bit further, but it's less obtrusive, and I'm going to plant that area, so that'll probably, well, virtually disappear. And the filter I've located on that side, so it's out of the way. Much easier to disguise that, isn't it, really, with a bit of camouflage, something like that. All in all, fish very happy with it. I used half a roof slate, if you can see that there, sitting on 2 bricks, end on end, flat on the bottom, so they're not going to puncture through the lining at all. The fish absolutely love it now because they've got somewhere that they can actually retreat to. That square thing on the top is actually a basket with water lilies in. This time of year you don't see much growth, but in the next month or so I will. These are irises that originally were in a pot that my dad had, and in the pot they're quite a dark green. In the water they're this colour. So whether they're doing better in here than in the pot is questionable. But yeah, reasonably happy with that now. Certainly the fish seem much more settled. There was a lot of silt in the bottom. It took several days for the water to clear. And the thing with ponds is you've got to allow them 72 hours to settle, because you've got a lot of chlorine and stuff like that in it. Well, I managed to bring that down to about 2 to 3 days. Because what I did, I put a net in, fished the fish out, put them in a small tank. It was actually an overflow tank that I've got kicking around. Put them in that, so I used the water from the pond in it, obviously. Transferred the fish into it. I tell you, that's a job and a half, chasing the fish with a net. They don't like going in them. So what I did, to get them acclimatised to the new pond, I would take a jug full of water out of the holding tank, sling it in the pond, and then take another jug full of water out of the pond and put it in the holding tank. Do that every 5 minutes or so until I've got about 3/4 of the holding tank with the water out of here. Left them for about an hour and then came out and then plonked them back in the pond, and they've been happy ever since. I say it was a little murky to start with, and I've used some anti-algae stuff in the water early on, so I'm not transferring any of that back. But there we are, and that's the pond that I did last year, using scaffold board, painted with actually it's sprayable fence paint, but it was great. Allwin do it, and just gave it a coat of that. But I think in time, probably what I'll do is paint this perimeter red. I think it would look better. My sister said, yeah, your father would have done that. But there you go, that's the pond.
The George Grundy look-alike.
Oh yes.
Oh! Brilliant. Have you noticed, because the camera's on, he's done a good shot?
That is brilliant.
Well done, Rob.
I'm astounded by that.
Yeah, so are we.
I was listening to what he was telling me though.
Yeah, he's a good...
Lost. To win, you've got to get money in those. Well, you've got to get the ball in those. Before we had amusement arcades and all the electronics, and I think I've shown this once before, amusement arcades were full of these things. And I mentioned recently that I'm 63 now, but anyway, in 1968, as a very young boy, my dad took me into an amusement arcade in Pilwin that had all these kinds of machines, and he gave us a stack of pennies, and we spent a good half hour in there and enjoyed every minute of it. There's no electronics in any of this at all, but oh, what fun they are. But anyway, that's not the reason I'm showing you this. Let me show you. Covering the camera. I've got another one. This one has needed a bit of work. Mechanically, I've got it working now, but I'll tell you what this is. This is a 1953 Bryan's Pilwin. And it's an interesting case because Bryan's, the company Bryan's, Mrs. Bryan, painted the backflashes. That's what this bit of the background's called, the backflash. She painted them by hand. It's a hideous clown, and no explanation as to why the tongue is coming out of his chin. Nobody knows. Anyway, it's made of oak and showing signs of wear. You know what I mean? This sort of damage. And a little bit along this edge, if I remember rightly. But this is the case. And as I say, it's made of oak, and what I had thought of, well, let's just make a new case. I can always get some oak by cutting out some old furniture, because it'll still work out cheaper. But what hadn't occurred to me, that although it has damage, like on this corner, I have some issues with it. Bear in mind, this is post-war. This one's, well, 56 is pre-56. Yes, 53, because it's one of the first Pilwins. But it's got these marks on the sides and the top. And if I make a new case, I will have devalued it, won't I? So I've had to rethink this. So I've decided what I'm going to do. It will sand down quite well. It'll all clean up and I can re-varnish it. I shall get rid of this number 19 because I think whatever amusement arcade that came out of, that was painted on it, so we don't need to worry about keeping that. But all the other marks are intrinsic to this item, and I will devalue it if I make a new case. So I think sometimes when you've got something that's old, you kind of have to accept it for what it is. And certainly with this, you can buy new backflashes. You know, they're printed on paper and with a glossy finish. But I would lose the original background that was painted by Mrs. Bryan. Simple one, this one. You just got to get it in the clown's mouth. Takes 1 new pennies. It's obviously been blocked up there because it used to take the old pennies. And it could be converted back to take the old pennies. But the only problem with that is they're getting few and far between, old pennies. I don't come across them that much, and they seem to sell them for quite a lot online for old pennies. And I just think, we'll keep it with the new penny for now. If somebody wants to convert it back to old pennies in the future, then they're very welcome to do that. But I just thought I'd show you these. They're a wonderful piece of art, if nothing else. And so what I shall do is I shall take these off, give it a really good sand down so the wood's as clean as I can get it. I'll try and do a better job of blending that in with wood filler, and just generally clean the whole thing up and get it as it should be. The cup wasn't straight and it's got a bend in it there, but you can actually get replacement cups for these. One of the few things you can get. So there you go. That's a Bryan's Pilwin. I'll tell you what, I'm fed up with these fluctuating fuel prices. You know, I think most of my life is given over to projects. I don't know how this came to be, really. I had this discussion with my mother the other day, trying to work out whether it came from my father or whether it came from my grandfather. She thinks it was my grandfather because he was in the Royal Engineers during the Second World War. Called up. His services were required, I think the words he used. Anyway, you know, even from an early age, I've always been interested in how things work, how they're put together, and I don't like to be beaten. Anyway, I bought this software-defined radio, which is basically an Arduino, if any of you are familiar with those small development boards, basically a mini computer, and then there's one chip on the board that handles all the radio frequencies, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I've had it in a prototype case. I've just taken it out for the moment, for about 2 to 3 weeks, so I can actually use it. I mean, it's a bit unwieldy using a board like that, isn't it? But I really wanted a better solution. Certainly, I mean, I've seen people make cases for these. There are various 3D printed ones, models around which you can print, but they're not great. They're not great, and more importantly, they're not shielded. And with a lot of electronics, you need a shielded case. It needs to be grounded, otherwise you get buzzing and noise, and the screen noise when you operate the screen. It's not loud, but you're aware of it. If it's not grounded, you will get screen noise. So it's taken me some time to find a case for it. Unfortunately, although you can buy these, what you can't do is buy the case separately. I've tried, I haven't found anybody, not even in China, that can supply me with one. So I've sort of come to the conclusion that probably the cases were proprietary, and I don't know, made one case, one board, and that's it. They don't sell them separately. But what I did find, after a lot of searching and a lot of measuring, was this. Now, I think this case is going to be spot on. I took a bit of a gamble on it, but the dimension seemed about right. And as it turns out, and I'm going to drop this in one end, just loosely, but that is going to fit in there bang on. Do you see what I mean? Obviously, they're going to need deeper controls, but you've got a headphone socket and you've got a charge socket at this end. They'll end up coming up flush with that, and in fact it'll go down a couple of more mil the other end once the whole thing's assembled. So the only thing is, because it is all made of, well, it's made of a coated aluminium, which would be fine and make a great shield, but what I don't want to be doing is drilling holes and then find I've got it a mil out either way. You've got to be really accurate with this. So I'm going to use proper digital calipers, do they call them that, to get all the proper measurements of it. But more importantly, rather than mess with the metal ends, which they're like this, it's just a plate one end, I'll make a plastic copy of that and then drill the holes accurately in the plastic, and as long as I know it's right, I can then transfer that to the metal ones. Seems sensible, doesn't it? So yeah, that's another project I've got ongoing, but also and I will come back to this probably next week, because I know a lot of people have bought these SDR boards and are probably in the same boat that I'm in terms of a case. The plastic ones aren't great. They're all right, but they're not great. The only thing is you have to bring the board up sufficiently so that that antenna connector sits just above the case. That shouldn't be a problem though. The one good thing about this compared to my prototype is it's just fractionally deeper, which means it will take the speaker, which is obviously going to be screwed on the bottom, and a rechargeable battery, and there's ample room for that in that case, and it's quite a nice case. I think the total cost of that was £8. But anyway, I'll put a link below and the price I paid for it, and if you can find it, good luck to you. But this is definitely the case for the job. Anyway, this is the back of the Bryan's Pilwin. Not even its original. Sorry about the shadows. In case you want to look at Kegworth, Derby, that's where it's made. I say made in 1953, but I just thought I'd show you some of the mechanics on this. Now I'm not sure, but I think this gear here alters the spring tension, because obviously you ping the ball round and you'd get used after a while to just how much pressure to put on it to get a win. So quite early on they put in a variable spring pressure thing. I can't actually, I'm assuming it's that. I can't think what else that would be, unless that just stops you getting a free ball. Don't know anyway, but this is the back. But what I've decided to do, right, I've already unscrewed this from the frame on the front. So we'll just one-handed. There we go. Now, as I mentioned, these were hand painted by Mrs. Bryan, and I haven't worked out if it's been painted. Well, apparently they were screen printed on acetate, or so that's possibly what was done. So maybe it was painted from the back. Against my better judgment, what I've decided to do is order a replacement backflash. I shall pull this out and see whether it's salvageable. I mean, it is getting on a bit now, and also look, they're starting to split. No, that's actually painted onto the wood. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll obviously have to remove the metal strips. They're fed through the back like almost like split pins and then peeled over. I'll just have to remove this, take off the acetone and put a new backflash on it and keep the original in the background. So, you know, I haven't actually lost it and it'll be protected by it. Mechanically it's very sound. The front, if I flip this over, I've been quite busy over the last few days. They're made of oak, these, believe it or not. What I've done is removed, you know, all of these that were on the corners. There's 4 in all. I've removed all of these, and it is old wood, so there's only so much you can do in terms of sanding. But I have improved it without, you know, detracting from its originality. I think it's interesting. This, look, the frame. It's square to there. It's square up to there. Yeah, square up to there. But then it's curved in this corner. Very odd. It's like a half-finished one. Don't quite get that. Anyway, it is what it is. I've unscrewed the cup, flicker handle. All the hardware's come off it. I have ordered a new cup because you can get replacement ones. There is a company actually that makes these new, and if you type Allwin's penny arcade on eBay, you'll see loads of what look like pristine ones, but they're not. They're reproductions. They're not originals, and they've also got more modern backflashes. And fair play to them, they look great. I guess a lot of pubs buy those for the price of them, but you know, they're £700, £800 each. One of these in good condition, because they're much sought after apparently, the Bryan's Pilwin play with the clown with the tongue coming out of his chin, and yeah, they command quite a price. I have seen them up for a couple of £1,000 each, so I'd say it's a bit of a compromise, isn't it? You know, it is what it is. It has got its age. I could have made a new front for it, but I think it would just look too clean. And all I'm going to use is a matte varnish on this to protect the wood, at least keep it in that kind of state for a period of time. And as I say, I've got to change the backflash on that. But this is a project that I've got on amongst other things, like trying to go to work and earn a living. But there you go. I think, yeah, oak. But they just don't use oak now. Have you noticed if you buy an oak table now, it'll say solid wood, but if you look at it, it's made of little chunks of oak all glued together. It's rare that you see whole pieces of oak, and it's not. This is, I would imagine, English oak, I would have thought. Don't know if somebody's an expert on wood. Yeah, so I've got a fair bit to do. I also noticed that when you shut the door, there's quite a gap there. But where the hinges are, they were sunk in way too deep, I thought. So I'm going to put a sliver. My stepfather's given me a little bit of oak, and I'm going to cut a sliver to go in there and then set the hinges back that way, which should push the door over. Only has to go a couple of mil and it'll line up. And that's where the penny slot was, the old penny at that. So there you go. That's what you've got to do when you want to work on one of these. Pennies keep falling out of this thing, keep finding them. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Tell you what I find remarkable about these, and bear in mind there's no electronics at all. Very playable game, designed totally, all those mechanics, to deprive you of your small change. Genius, I'd say. Now, finally this week, because next week we're getting into wiring, I've got some sockets to put in the hallway and a hole to drill through the wall to take the cable into what will be my front room eventually. It's still full of building materials. But you'll notice that part of my hobbies includes radios, and this is actually it says Trio, but you also get them rebadged as Kenwood as well. It is a ham radio, so one can receive and one can transmit, so it's called a transceiver, and it's a TS930S, and I got this at a fairly knocked down price because it sustained damage on this corner. The ends of the pots were broken off. I've ordered a couple of replacements, second-hand ones, and the missing knobs, because there should be like an inner one. So we'll find an example. See how those, you've got a control on the outside, you've got a control on the inside. So what happened to these knobs, I don't know. Presumably they're laying in the bottom of a van owned by whichever courier company transported this rather badly. Anyway, I've ordered some new pots. I'm going to have to at some point strip this down and do those. But what I did do, I was tuned in last night and got Kuwait, Mexico and the US. This is a very, very sensitive receiver with all the bells and whistles. Anyway, my plan is later in the year is to apply for my ham license. I'm in sort of two minds over this. It seems somewhat anarchy in a way. I've listened to some of the transmissions, and mostly they'll say, well, I'm running this area and you're coming through at this strength. Yeah, thanks for that. And then they move on, which seems a bit, I don't know. So, but anyway, I think it'd be nice to get my licence, and at least I can converse with other countries. Nice little hobby in my retirement, being as there is not a woman in my life now. I've got to have something to fill my time with. So anyway, that's it from Ralph's house for this week, and next week we will be chasing out plaster to run new cables. I've got to put 2 new wall sockets, possibly 3 in the hallway, one high up to supply the doorbell, because originally the doorbell, the cable went all the way down the hallway and ended up under the stairs, which seemed a bit of a long run for a doorbell. So I'm going to put a socket there, and also I'm going to put one in my porch with an isolator switch inside, so that if I want to plug in a vacuum cleaner or a steam, I don't know, pressure washer or something, not that I've got one, but it means I can plug it in the porch without having to trail cables through windows. We've all done it. It's horrendous, and it's bad enough, and you've got to do it with a lawnmower. So I'm going to make sure I do that. While I'm doing the haul, I'll do that, and at the same time I'll wire up my porch light, which is as yet unconnected. So that's it from Ralph's house for this week. If you were looking for DIY, it's a bit low on DIY this week, but we'll be back to the norm next week. Anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.